Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you share with us and really pull out the key insights, giving you a faster path to, well, genuine understanding.
Yeah, getting right to the core.
Exactly. And today we're tackling some really thought-provoking stuff. Modern manhood. We're looking at it through Jason Wilson's upcoming book, The Man the Moment Demands. It's out in 2025, but we've got excerpts right here.
And our goal for you, the learner, is to really get a handle on the pressures men are dealing with today. You know, the societal expectations around masculinity.
And also, importantly, to explore some of the alternative ways of thinking that Wilson puts forward in the book.
Right. We'll be touching on things like emotional expression, societal norms, and this concept he introduces, the comprehensive man.
So let's start with the book's initial idea. Wilson observes that little boys, they often start out so alive, authentic, right?
Totally. Full of expression, carefree. But then, he argues, there's this cultural shaping process that kicks in.
Shaping them into, well, less expressive versions of themselves.
Pretty much. Confined by these really strict, rigid notions of what being a man means. And Wilson's point is that this suppression, this stifling of their basic humanity for the sake of masculinity, it carries a heavy price.
A negative weight, he calls it. Let's dig into that shaping process more. He gives some really strong examples of how this happens day to day.
He does. Like when boys or men try to share how they're feeling, their ventings, they just get dismissed as complaining.
Ah, okay. And showing pain.
That's seen as weakness. Simple as that. Feeling exhausted, oh, that's just laziness.
Wow. No room for vulnerability.
None. And if they push back against something, it's rebellion. If they pause or hesitate.
Double-mindedness, right? Uncertainty.
Exactly. And maybe the most telling one, tears. Crying leads to being called soft.
So the message is pretty clear. Don't show those things.
Right. Wilson suggests the result of all this, these constant little messages, is that men learn really early on to just bottle up their anguish. Keep it hidden.
They're conditioned to project indifference, maybe, or just this constant image of strengths, no matter what's going on inside.
That's the idea. And this pressure to just suffer quietly, he argues, it can actually lead men to stop looking for purpose, maybe turn to unhealthy ways of coping, or sometimes just give up.
Which connects to another thing Wilson brings up, this sense of confusion a lot of men feel.
Yeah, he links that confusion to a lack of purpose, a kind of fundamental uncertainty about why they're here, what their meaning is.
He uses that movie reference, right? Wanted.
He does, yeah. The scene where Wesley, the main character, is asked over and over, why are you here?
And Wilson highlights Wesley's inner pain in that moment. Not physical pain, but something deeper.
Exactly. Suggesting that maybe a lot of men can relate to that feeling, you know, that underlying ache of not quite knowing your place or direction. Or maybe you know someone who feels that way.
And it can show up in ways that seem small, but are actually quite revealing. Like when men just say, I'm tired.
He shares that really moving story, the anecdote about the woman whose husband died.
Oh, yeah. She commented on one of his videos.
Right. Saying she only understood the real depth behind those words, I'm tired, after he was gone. She hadn't fully grasped it when he was alive.
And Wilson sees that as pointing to something deeper.
Yeah, he thinks it points to this core issue, an emotional instability underneath it all, which leads to this really profound weariness of spirit, not just physical tiredness.
And this isn't just individual anecdotes. He backs it up with some pretty stark statistics.
Very concerning ones, like men being responsible for 90% of violent physical assaults. That's huge.
And the suicide rate.
Also deeply troubling. In the U.S., it's 3.5 times higher for men than for women.
And he draws a direct line from these stats back to the way boys are raised.
He does. He believes it's a direct result of systematically discouraging things like caring, compassion, empathy as young men grow up.
Which leads him to this concept he calls, what was it? Emotional incarceration.
Yeah, emotional incarceration. It's like the self-imposed prison, mentally.
Yeah.
Men locking away any emotion they've learned is supposedly unmanly.
Isolating their hearts, basically.
That's the phrase he uses. And he gives this interesting example with sagging pants.
Right, which started in prisons because they didn't allow belts.
Exactly. But Wilson saw it differently on the outside. While many saw it as just rebellion, he interpreted it as a sign of sagging souls.
An outward sign of inner hopelessness.
And the way authority figures often reacted, you know, the punishments, the reprimands, he argues, that just made things worse. It deepened the defensiveness, pushed those authentic feelings down even further.
It's interesting how he connects these outward things like clothing choices to inner states, like the hooded sweatshirts.
Yeah, the portable caves analogy. That's quite powerful. He mentions seeing Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony wearing hoodies indoors after Kobe Bryant died.
Even public figures, grieving publicly but still seeking that shield.
Right. And based on his mentoring work, Wilson suggests boys use hoodies like that as a shield against the tough stuff in life, the inner struggles, like depression, abandonment, shame.
So it makes you wonder, doesn't it, how many men are walking around in their own kind of portable cave, trying to hide from their pain?
It's a strong image, and all of this suppression, this hidden pain, it builds up, and that leads to what Wilson calls the emotional earthquake.
Okay, let's unpack that analogy.
Yeah.
Anger is the epicenter.
Right. The anger is what everyone sees on the surface. It's the visible shaking.
But it's caused by something deeper.
Exactly. The epicenter lies right above the hypocenter. That's where the real causes, the root emotions like insecurity, fear, maybe shame.
But because of that emotional incarceration we talked about.
Men often can't even identify those deeper feelings, let alone process or release them healthily.
So instead of dealing with the root cause, the pressure just builds and builds.
Until it erupts as anger. The emotional earthquake.
Okay, so just to kind of pull this together from what we've explored in Wilson's ideas, the main thrust seems to be that these really narrow, tight definitions of masculinity that society pushes.
They lead men to suppress their emotions in really damaging ways.
Yeah, and that has serious negative consequences, not just for the men themselves, but like for everyone around them too.
Absolutely, for society as a whole.
But he doesn't just leave it there, right? He offers an alternative. This idea of the comprehensive man.
Someone who can embody a much broader range of qualities, not just the stereotypical hypermasculine stuff.
Embracing more of the human experience, maybe?
I think that's a good way to put it. And that dedication in the book really hits home, doesn't it?
The one. To every man who is tired of not being able to say he is tired.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
It really does. And apparently these ideas are already getting some positive feedback. Wilson mentions the cry like a man concept in particular.
People responding to it.
Yeah, he says men are finding it liberating, like it's permission to break free from that emotional incarceration. It seems to be striking a chord.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We've talked a lot about this tension, right, between what society expects and being your authentic self.
That rigid word, masculinity.
Yeah. Is sticking rigidly to that definition really serving you or serving the man in your life? Or is there maybe more value in being more fluid, becoming, like Wilson says, whatever the moment demands?
That's a powerful question.
Maybe think about what parts of your own, exuberant, carefree boyhood might actually be worth reclaiming. Are there qualities there you've lost touch with?
Or even if you could rewrite the definition of manhood for yourself, what would you include? What would it look like for you?
And just building on that, Wilson's book isn't just about pointing out the problems.
No, definitely not. It offers practical steps, too. He talks about mirror time, using affirmations.
As a way to start challenging those negative, self-condemning thoughts that get ingrained.
Exactly. A first step towards dismantling those old messages. It makes you think about the practical side, how intentional self-reflection, the way we talk to ourselves, can actually make a difference.
Something practical to consider.